Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Recovery Talk. This is a part two of a two-part series I'm doing on rewiring and why it is so important and so powerful. And in this week's episode, I'm going to talk about sneaky behaviors and habits and safety behaviors and how that often is what keeps people stuck. I'm talking about sneaky behaviors and safety behaviors in one episode because they often are the same thing. And if they're not the same thing, there at least is a lot of overlap. But I could start by defining them. So sneaky behaviors, the way that I tend to define it, or sneaky habits, I sometimes call it as well, is the more small and subtle things that you're doing, sometimes without fully realizing, that keep you stuck. It's the innocent little things that maybe haven't really been picked up on or investigated much in your treatment. Maybe other people haven't even commented on it that much, or even maybe they are, but more in a joking way. It's not really seen as a big deal or very serious. It's just seen as little quirks almost. It's the things that you're doing that aren't necessarily physically harming you, and you may not even think they're mentally harming you either. So here are some examples of the kind of things that I'm talking about. Maybe you used to compulsively exercise every single day for hours and you stopped all that. You're fine, your treatment team is very proud of you for having canceled your gym membership, but you still have to do a 30-minute walk every day, no matter what. Doesn't matter the time, doesn't matter the weather, doesn't matter if you're feeling sick, doesn't matter if you're injured. You have to do it. And it cannot be 28 minutes. It has to be at least 30 minutes. 31 minutes is fine, but 30 minutes is a minimum. It's not a hard maximum. Another example. So maybe you feel pretty at peace with all foods. You can go to a restaurant and eat whatever you're served, but when you are cooking at home, that oil is being treated like it is a poisonous material. You are standing there with the oil bottle and you're kind of measuring up, okay, 1 teaspoon. It can't be more than that. If anything falls in the pan more than that, you take a napkin and you clean it off. But you're eating everything. You can get greasy Chinese takeaway. But when you're cooking, nope. And maybe you've stopped weighing yourself. Good job. But you are monitoring your body a little bit in the mirror. At least once a day, you have to have a check-in just to see that nothing has gotten out of control, not on your watch. Or maybe you find that overall you can eat everything, but you do get the low-fat version if you can. And of course, if you were served a regular Coca-Cola instead of a Diet Coke, no, you wouldn't drink that. But you're drinking soda though. It's Diet Coke, but isn't it something? Or maybe you can eat cookies, but you can't finish a full cookie. Or maybe you can, but only in the perfect context. You can't just casually grab one on the go. You have to be at home with your own ritualistic behaviors around food and eating. That lamp has to be on. You have to be wearing comfy clothing. You have to be undisturbed. It has to be perfect. And if not, there's no point in quote unquote wasting calories. I could have gone on and on and on with examples because every single day, okay, not the weekends, but when I work, every single work day, I see this over and over and over. Sneaky little things that may not scream out eating disorder to other people. It could be like, oh yeah, haha, John is just not a soda person. Or Jane is just such a committed walker. But if you know, you know. And safety behaviors are very tied into sneaky behaviors because they often are a sneaky behavior. But the way that I like to define safety behaviors is that it is something that's done to alleviate anxiety. And oftentimes it's something done especially when you're doing something challenging or scary that is you're doing it to try to alleviate the anxiety around the challenge, and it may feel like it's working, but it actually worsens anxiety long term. That's how I see a safety behavior. So what are some examples of this? What are some examples of these sneaky little safety behaviors that people in eating disorder recovery often do that actually holds them back? So, a good example could be you're maybe going to the bakery to challenge your fear of pastries. And beforehand, you are researching the bakery. So, you're looking for maybe like a healthier bakery. You're researching the pastries that it sell. You're researching the calories, maybe trying to find a lower calorie option or an option that you deem healthier or has safer ingredients. And then before you go to the bakery, make sure that your breakfast is just a little bit safer than usual. Maybe you're engaging in more eating disorder behaviors. Maybe you're counting more, weighing out the food, or maybe you're just choosing foods that feel more safe. Maybe you're eating a little bit less to quote unquote save up calories for the challenge. And then you're there in the bakery and you are going for the lowest calorie or safest somehow pastry that you found. You're trying to get them to kind of pick you the smallest one as well. And when you get it, maybe you're eating it very slowly. Maybe you're eating it very secretively because you do not want to be seen eating a pastry. Oh my God, what would people think? Shocking. And then afterwards, you make sure to have just a little bit of a safer dinner. Maybe you have a little bit less, maybe you're going a bit more for safe foods, vegetables kind of taking over the plate a little bit more than usual. And then you show up to treatment very proud, saying, yes, I did challenge the pastry. Take it off the list. And then a year passes and you wonder, why am I still afraid of pastries? I've challenged it so many times. Safety behaviors. That is why. The example I mentioned has multiple safety behaviors. And in the moment, it feels like it alleviates your anxiety. Oh, if I just know the calories, I'm going to feel calmer. And you know what? My brain is probably telling me that it has more calories than it actually has, so I will feel calmer. Here's the problem. These behaviors show your brain that doing that activity is really scary. Why? Because your brain is responding to what you're doing. It doesn't respond to reassurance, it responds to action. If you are behaving as if going to the bakery is a high risk activity that requires all of these mental gymnastics and weird little things you're doing, then your brain is going to keep believing that it is dangerous and it's going to keep sending out fear signals. And don't get me wrong, doing a challenge with safety behaviors is better than not doing a challenge at all. But you are not getting as much as possible out of the challenge. If you want the most bang for your bucks with a challenge, stop those little things. And if you're unable to stop them, at least work on reducing them gradually. Also, those behaviors aren't even always that successful in reducing short-term anxiety. I know I said that, yes, it sometimes can reduce your anxiety short-term, but worsen it long-term, because it shows your brain that it's still scary. But actually, sometimes what happens when people engage in safety behaviors is that they are priming their brain to be more anxious because you're signalizing to your brain that you're about to do something very scary. And this is why I sometimes see with clients when if a challenge happened very unexpectedly, yes, in some cases that can overwhelm and make it really scary, but sometimes it also can actually make it easier because you hadn't primed your brain beforehand that you're about to do something very scary. So maybe you were just randomly thrown into a situation where it's like, oh yeah, we'll go get cookies, and you weren't quite prepared for it, but you did it and it wasn't that bad. Because your brain didn't really quite get the memo that this is scary. It didn't have hours of safety behaviors and rumination and researching beforehand that showed your brain you're about to do something scary. So you may have actually been in a bit more of a relaxed place, even if that, I guess, shock could still scare you. So I mentioned some examples of sneaky habits a bit earlier in this episode, and I mentioned some in regards to body checking and walking. And these can also be safety behaviors. Again, this is why I just do them all in one episode. So let's take walking, for example. Imagine you've been at the bakery, you've done the pastry challenge, and then you do a walk. Nothing wrong with going for a walk, maybe you just wanted to do that. But if you're doing it because you're responding to an anxious feeling around what you ate, then you are signalizing to your brain that, yeah, you just did something scary. So you have to do this compensatory behavior to alleviate that. And this is one of the reasons why I get so frustrated when I see walking being recommended as like a default mental health intervention for everyone who feels anxious. Depends on why you feel anxious. And there's nothing wrong with doing a soothing behavior when you feel anxious, maybe talking to someone for a bit of support, listening to some relaxing music, doing some arts and crafts to distract yourself, that's fine. But it is once you're doing the behavior to kind of compensate and to get that relief. And I know this can be confusing because someone may say, oh, yeah, but calling my friend also gives me relief. Yeah, but in a different way. Because if you're walking with the thought of, well, at least I'm burning some calories here, you're not going to have that when you're calling your friend. So question your intention. And sometimes the intention is not always so clear cut. Sometimes you may actually genuinely really want to go for a walk, but there is also that added element of, oh yeah, but I just had a binge and it's going to make me feel better. Or, oh, well, I mean, the number on the scale went up this morning, so I should probably get the walk in. That's when you start wiring your brain in the wrong direction. And a good way to find out is there a lot of anxiety, guilt, shame, resistance by not doing the behavior? That's a sign that you're veering into safety behavior territory. And actually, the behavior that I mentioned a little bit earlier, where you're body checking and you stop weighing yourself, so you're not stepping on the scale, but you are checking in the mirror, that I would actually say is a very classical safety behavior, where you're kind of letting go of one behavior, but you're doing something else. And don't get me wrong, sometimes recovery means letting go of a very harmful behavior for a slightly less harmful, but still maybe not optimal behavior. A good example of this is binge eating. So I work with a lot of people in binge restrict or binge purge cycles. And some of them find that temporarily buying a smaller pack of crisps, for example, rather than a multi-pack, and having that in the house, like a smaller bag, finishing it, and then not having a bunch of other stuff in the house, is helpful for them in terms of combating binging. But it is technically, in a way, a little bit of a sneaky behavior because you're avoiding having the full thing in the house. But you're doing it temporarily so you can build up and then have the multi-pack in the house without worrying about it. So I do want to say that sometimes we do a little bit of a going from one very bad behavior to a less bad one. But it is not a long-term solution. You can't keep body checking every day for the rest of your life and call it recovery. In the same way that in binge recovery, you can't avoid those multi-packs for the rest of your life, because at some point you're going to have to be faced with it. And you're also going to have to question, is this safety behavior actually helpful and necessary? So in the crisps example that I used, maybe for some people that's what they need to do to re-implement more binge foods. But maybe you're someone going through extreme hunger where you know that you're just going to have to let yourself eat. Trying to restrict it is just going to backfire. Then it's probably not for you. And same thing. Do you really need to body check when you stop weighing yourself? Is that actually making you feel more confident to let go of the scale? Is it helping you in any way? Is it helping you in your recovery? Or is it just helping the eating disorder? That's what you're going to have to ask yourself. And I know this can be hard sometimes to figure out yourself. I mean, this is typical things that I really work on with clients to figure out and get to the bottom of, which is which. And you're meant to outgrow some of the tools of recovery. They're not meant to be replacing one behavior with another forever. And I find that a lot of people are very attached to the safety behaviors because they genuinely believe that it helps their recovery. But again, does it help long term? Is it really the best behavior you could do? Is there maybe something you can do that's a little bit more recovery promoting and less eating disorder promoting? And do you have a plan on how to taper it off? Are you just going to keep doing the safety behavior forever? At least the way that I work when I work with someone, I'm not necessarily there to take away every single safety behavior on day one. That'd be kind of cruel. And also could maybe reinforce that whole all or nothing mindset that keep a lot of people actually stuck in their eating disorder rather than recovery. Don't get me wrong, sometimes people just have to rip off the band-aid and let that crap go. But I see a lot of people thinking that they are just doomed to do those safety behaviors forever because they believe that it keeps something worse at bay. Oh, well, if I go for a walk, then it stops me from purging, which is arguably worse than going for a 30-minute walk. Yeah, but could it actually be that you can work on reducing that walking behavior? Does that automatically mean that you will purge? Maybe that's a slightly limiting black and white belief that your eating disorder really thrives on. And this takes me into a very important point when I work with people. A lot of it is figuring out why this safety behavior feels so safe and what they are afraid would happen if they didn't do it. What is the worst case outcome? And I find that the brain tends to go into very excessive, dramatic modes here. oh, if I don't do this, I'll lose all control. If I don't do this one little thing, the whole block of dominoes would just fall down. And sometimes people may feel like they are protecting their recoveries by holding on to the safety behaviors. But more often, it's more protecting the eating disorder. And this is something to kind of very honestly ask yourself. This is something I often ask clients is, what is the worst case scenario you think or you're afraid would happen if you didn't do the safety behavior? And then checking in, is this actually realistic? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And if it is actually realistic, is it really that bad? Like, is it that awful? Are you sure you wouldn't handle that outcome? And even if it were bad, is it worth having an eating disorder over? Is it worth all of the stress and anxiety of the eating disorder to prevent this probably unlikely or not as bad outcome from happening? And if this worst case scenario is so awful, why? What do you think would happen if the worst case scenario come true? So this is typically work that I would do one-on-one with someone. It definitely could be work. Maybe you could try to journal a bit on it, but I just want to say that it's going to be slightly different once it is in a one-on-one conversation back and forth with someone. I'll use an example of how this may be. So imagine someone's worst case scenario is if they let go of the safety behavior, they would gain weight. And then we can look at, okay, well, is this realistic? Maybe it isn't. Maybe someone is convinced that their 30-minute daily walk somehow prevents them from like ballooning up in weight. Like, that's just not how weight regulation works. But maybe someone is just afraid to let go of general restriction and weight suppression behavior because they kind of know that they're probably not at the weight that is healthy for their body, and weight gain really scares them. And yeah, recovery realistically would mean weight gain for them. And in that case, yeah, maybe it is a likely outcome. Probably not by letting go of one safety behavior one time, but by consistently letting go of the eating disorder, you allow your body to find the weight that it wants to be at. And in that case, what we can look at is, okay, is it really that bad? Like, why would that be so bad? Like, why is gaining weight like the worst thing ever? And I find a very interesting phenomena here where someone with an eating disorder, they tend to drastically overestimate the amount they will gain and the amount of discrimination they will face. And don't get me wrong, I want to really make it clear that I absolutely acknowledge that there are people where recovery means restoring weight into a bigger body and where this means experiencing fat phobia. But I sometimes see people who realistically will probably restore weight into a body that would still be considered relatively slim by society, just like can go and buy clothing in normal shops, can fit into a plane seat, don't experience every medical concern they have at the doctor being dismissed because of their weight, etc., where they still believe that gaining weight will make them shunned from society and everyone laughing at them. And it's like, dude, most people cannot really tell the difference between BMI of 19 and 22. Like, it just looks the same to most people. I mean, if you're planning to be maybe a catwalk model, maybe different, but for most people, they just see someone who's quote unquote straight sized and they just see them as standard, right? That's just, honestly, that's just a society we live in. Weight discrimination typically happens once you fall under or over that norm significantly. But even if you do, it may not be as bad as you think. And I want to be careful in talking about an experience that isn't mine, so being in a bigger body. But I can tell you that people in bigger bodies are living fulfilling lives. They're in relationships, they're going to work. And people who recover into bigger bodies, they rarely say that the eating disorder was a better option. So this is the thing, that exploring that worst case scenario and kind of reality checking a bit. Is it as bad? Is it as likely to be as dramatically unfolding as you think? Are you sure you're going to triple your body weight in 3 days? Are you sure the amount of shaming you think you will experience is not just you projecting your own shame and assuming other people feel the same about your body? And even if you were to experience body shaming, are you sure that you can't handle it? Are you sure it makes recovery not worth it? Are you sure everyone or even most people feel that way or will act that way? Would you suggest an eating disorder as a reasonable alternative to other people? And if not, why are you so different? Why are you so unique? What makes you so uniquely flawed and different to everyone else? That's kind of like a narcissistic way of thinking, that you're so special, that the rules just don't apply to you, the rules that you would prescribe to other people. And then maybe once we figure out, like, okay, yeah, this doesn't make any sense, we can dig a bit into, where did this belief start? Was there any specific event? Was it a accumulation of events? Maybe you had a moment in the schoolyard when you were little where someone said something, they called you fat, and it just got implanted in your brain that fat is bad. I have to spend the rest of my life avoiding ever being hurt like that again. Or maybe it's just an accumulation of various events that happened maybe during a time where your brain was vulnerable, in a developmental stage, that you're extra sensitive to external comments and pressure. Maybe it was a parent that was always on a diet, or constant chatter in friend groups, maybe the spaces you were in online on social media. So it's just several things adding up and creating a belief system that no longer helps you. And I spoke about that in part 1 of this episode about rewiring, about how sometimes very random things can be implanted in the brain as a fear, or as like a very formative experience. Think about it this way. We all have some weird core memories that are like random things that weren't even really that meaningful, but they just became meaningful to us. And I think a lot of people stop here, especially sometimes in therapy. People think that if you know why you think and feel and behave the way you do, then okay, all good, then the behavior goes away. That's not true. Knowing why and understanding a little bit what your brain is trying to protect you from can absolutely be so helpful. And this is where I think therapy can play a really important role in recovery. But you have to use that to then change your behavior. So knowing that you're terrified of weight gain because someone called you fat when you were 10 years old, yeah, that can be helpful. But only if you then take that knowledge and you're like, okay, I had a very formative experience that really shook me, made me really afraid of experiencing that embarrassment, that social rejection again. And my brain is primed to want to avoid embarrassment and social rejection. And now my brain thinks it's protecting me by making me do all of these really weird things, including behaving really strange around oil. So I'm going to start challenging that behavior to show my brain that I am safe. That's when healing can happen. And yes, I often do this more exploration work with clients where we kind of explore where certain beliefs come from, and where we kind of explore if the so-called worst case scenario really is so bad, if it's likely, if it's something they can't handle. So kind of reality checking the situation a little bit. But there is a very fine line here to balance. And that is reality checking and challenging beliefs without it turning to reassurance seeking or rumination. And I'll be honest, especially earlier in my coaching career, I noticed that there were times where I would fall into reassurance seeking. And that can feel so helpful to be on the receiving end of in the moment. But the thing is that a reassurance-seeking brain is very greedy. It's going to want more and more reassurance, more and more and more. So you get reassurance of one thing, but then another fear pops up. And then it's almost like you're playing whack-a-mole with your fears, and your brain just doesn't get satisfied. So I always say that reality checking, kind of exploring fears, and kind of calling out the eating disorder bit can definitely be so helpful. But if the brain is just never satisfied, if it just finds another thing to latch onto, then maybe that is not the best strategy anymore. And sometimes you may find that giving yourself a bit of like a healthy self-reminder when your eating disorder anxiety is just going out of control can be super helpful, maybe help shut the eating disorder up a bit. But if it just keeps ruminating and going and going and going, and then you kind of have an answer for one thing, but not the other, and then it needs more information, and you're researching online, or you're freaking out and emailing your therapist, and oh my God, maybe it's better to learn to sit with that uncertainty. So this is another skill that I work on a lot with clients, is actually kind of knowing when we're kind of dipping into more reassurance seeking and rumination territory, and maybe should instead work a bit more of tolerating uncertainty. Because this is the thing, when you're letting go of these behaviors, you may not have 100% guarantee that it's going to go a certain way. I can't give you that. We can kind of look at what's likely or not, but there's never going to be that 100% certainty. And that's okay. You're going to have to learn to sit with that as well. So try and recognize rumination or excessive reassurance seeking as a potential sneaky habit or as a potential safety behavior. So often it's confused with an exclusively recovery promoting behavior. But it's only recovery promoting if it promotes your recovery, if it moves you further along in recovery and make you more likely to act on recovery things. And remember, when we talk about rewiring, the brain updates through experience, not reassurance. I can reassure you 1,000 times that you're not going to gain magically 10 pounds overnight by having that cookie. But your brain is not going to get the memo until you've challenged it enough times. And in recovery, what feels good isn't always what is actually good for you. Reassurance feels amazing. And sometimes it is what you need, but it's not always what you need. And you kind of have to know yourself here as well, because if you're a reassurance seeker, that probably means reassurance is not the best for you. So something that I mentioned earlier in this episode is that a lot of times sneaky little behaviors and safety behaviors aren't picked up on in treatment because they're more subtle and because they sometimes comes with you doing something else that's scary and challenging. So you kind of want to rain on your parade when you just did a fear food challenge that, oh yeah, but there was a lot of weird little behaviors around it, wasn't it? And I think the fact that it's not pointed out makes some people more reluctant to work on it because sometimes there can be a lot of resistance and almost embarrassment in taking initiative in your own recovery. Oh, if my therapist hasn't explicitly said that I need to stop going on those evening walks that I need to do or I can't sleep, then why should I bring it up? Here's the thing. Your recovery at the end of the day is your responsibility. And yes, of course, there's going to be some nuance here, for example, if someone is a very young child, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. Doesn't mean it's your fault. Doesn't mean the eating disorder is your fault, but recovery is your responsibility. And you have to help the people around you help you. You can see the best coach or therapist or psychiatrist or whatever it may be, but if you're not giving them the information that they need to help you, it's not going to go anywhere. And they can give you the best treatment program ever, but you are going to have to follow through. And if something isn't working out for you, it is your responsibility to be open and upfront about that. You cannot expect mind reading. So yes, it is a problem that traditional treatments sometimes overlook these more subtle, sneaky behaviors, but they also don't see what you do in a day. If you're not telling them, hey, I'm doing this and it's a problem for me, how can they help you? So please be open with yourself and with the relevant people around you. And at the end of the day, if you don't, you're going to be the one who suffer the consequences, not them. And I know how much the eating disorder hates the thought of letting go of doing things that you feel like you're kind of allowed to do. But play stupid games, win stupid prizes. If you're trying to see how much of the eating disorder you're still allowed to keep based on other people, then you're going to stay stuck. So something I do a lot when I work with someone is we really go through all of those little things that they're doing. And this is actually a lot easier said than done. If I ask someone on the spot, okay, what are some sneaky behaviors that you're doing? Some people just can't really think of anything in the moment. Or maybe they can come up with a few. But then once I start giving examples, they may find out, oh yeah, I can relate to that one and that one. Not that one, but that one definitely. And a lot of times as I work with someone, I may start picking up on a lot of sneaky behaviors. Just they said something and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, what was that? So sometimes it kind of comes with time. But another thing I tend to recommend people to do is really just try and observe yourself in third person and then note down these behaviors as you go along. Maybe like observe yourself, for example, when you're cooking and then compare to maybe a friend or a family member that has a very healthy relationship with food. How do you guys prepare food differently? So maybe you're making a piece of toast and maybe you notice yourself, like you're cutting a very thin slice of toast and then you're putting on peanut butter, but put on quite a thin layer and you're definitely not licking the knife afterwards. And meanwhile, your friend just gets a random slice of toast, maybe even gets a bit excited about, woohoo, big slice of toast. Yeah, this is good. And then just dashes on the peanut butter in an amount that looks good to them and then licks the knife and then eat it and goes on with their day. And then what you have to think of is how do you want to be around food? So if it is hard for you to look back and think about, oh, how did I used to be with food? This is often the case for people who've had an eating disorder for a long time or got an eating disorder very young. They find it hard to have like a point of reference. They don't really know what to compare themselves to. Like, I don't remember how it's like to have a healthy relationship with food. And if so, picking a few healthy role models that you can kind of mirror a bit can be very helpful. So maybe your friend James has a super chill relationship with food. Well, what do James do that you don't? How are you guys acting differently in the kitchen? And then start adapting more of James' behaviors. This goes with movement as well. Maybe there's someone you know who you really like their relationship with movement. And this is a bit controversial in recovery spaces, but I don't necessarily think the people who do the least movement are always the people with the healthiest relationship with it. Don't get me wrong, you really do not want to start comparing yourself to a very highly active person when you are in recovery. But you may actually have, for example, a friend that, do like to do sports, but they have a really good relationship with it. They have no issue taking a break. And then you may have another friend that currently is completely sedentary, but you know that it comes with a lot of guilt for them. You know that suddenly they will swear they're going to go to the gym and shame themselves and then go for a week and then never go again. So again, you kind of want to think, where do I want to be? What kind of relationship does my healthy self want to have with food, body, and movement? And how can I behave differently? And not just what can I do right now, but also what kind of steps do I need to take now to get there? So maybe you eventually want to have a really good relationship with exercise and be able to do sports. Maybe you used to love to do sports and that's fine, but can you do that now to get there? Or do you maybe need to have a period of maybe taking a break from movement to get there? So focusing on the bigger picture is very helpful because in the moment, those sneaky little habits, they seem so innocent. But actually reminding yourself that they are part of a bigger pattern, that it's not just about the oil in the pan. It's not just about that walk. It's about something else. It's about something bigger. And remind yourself, if you don't challenge these sneaky behaviors, where are you going to end up? Where are you going to be? How can you be fully recovered while still doing eating disorder things? And it may seem tempting to kind of settle for like, I'm better, but I still do these little things. Well, fine. Even if you did that, you would be at a much higher risk of really falling back and crashing and burning if you're not fully recovered. I mean, it makes sense. Not being completely better from the thing makes you more likely to slide back into the thing. So even if you feel like, well, it won't make my life any better not to do these things, it will at least make your life safer. The problem is that your brain doesn't get that. Your brain thinks that the things that are going to make your life safer is going to make your life more dangerous. And that's why it's your responsibility to show your brain that it is safe. And as I've been saying throughout this episode and the part 1 as well, you do that through repeated exposure. That changes that automatic habitual fear response. Because it all becomes a habit. It becomes that ingrained network. It becomes that worn path that I mentioned in the first episode. It doesn't need to be done perfectly. It doesn't need to be done whilst feeling completely calm. By the way, that's just probably not going to happen. But it does have to be done consistently. There has to be an increase in difficulty level with time. Progressive overload, essentially. And some people, yes, are able to do that on their own, but most people are going to need some form of external support. Don't fall into the trap of, I know what I need to do, so I just have to do it, and then nothing happens. And you're like, but I'm not going to seek out help because I know what to do, and they're just going to tell me what I need to do. That's not how help works. That's not how coaching works. That's not how therapy works. I mean, I guess there are some coaches or therapists who may work that way, but not anyone who knows the basics of human psychology. It's not about telling you what to do. It's about supporting you through actually doing it. So if you're feeling stuck, seek out help. Also, seeking out some accountability from the people around you can sometimes be helpful. So maybe telling your partner like, hey, so I'm going to make dinner today with you. Can you just kind of keep an eye on my oil behaviors? Maybe remind me to just use a generous amount. Or maybe even handing the oil bottle to your partner and actually letting them pour without you being like a hawk watching the pan. Maybe you need to plan out your challenges a bit for a while. Maybe you can challenge or plan challenges with someone else. Of course, you want to balance the line between codependency and being overly dependent on one person in your recovery. You want to build some independence as well, but it is completely fine to some degree to lean onto the people around you a bit, at least for a period of time. And of course, as long as the dynamic stays healthy and that there is consent from either part, because I know that eating disorders are not always so straightforward. If there is one kind of summary of the whole topic of rewiring, I think it would be feel the fear and do it anyways. I just love that saying because this is the thing. People wait for the fear to go away. I know I've said this already, but it is just, I see it over and over. People wait for the fear to go away and then they'll do the thing. It's the other way around. You've wired your brain into this whole eating disorder thing. You can wire your way out. Are you willing to do that? That's what you're going to have to ask yourself. Not whether or not it's possible, because it is, but are you willing to do that? And are you willing to stick with it? I hope you guys enjoyed this 2-part episode. Feel free to rate this podcast, give it a follow so you get notified when episodes are out. And yeah, you can give me a follow on social media, on Instagram at Amalie Lee or at letsrecover.co.uk. And for coaching related inquiries, head over to letsrecover.co.uk. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.